Hello, and welcome to Making the Rounds, a podcast by the American Medical Association featuring advice, interviews, and discussions on the most important topics impacting residents' lives and careers. In this episode, anesthesia fellow Chirag Shah, MD, and Laurel Road's Alex Macielak discuss the state of student debt in the U.S. and considerations for improving your credit score. This episode of Making the Rounds is one in a four-part series on student loans, student debt, and refinancing. As a disclaimer, every situation is unique, and it's important to do your own research before making financial decisions. Here's Chirag and Alex.
Hello everyone, I'm Chirag. I'm a current anesthesia fellow at the University of Illinois doing a regional fellowship. I'm joined today by Alex Macielak, who's a part of Laurel Road, and we'll be talking about student loans, student debt, and financing.
Thanks, Chirag. Excited to be here.
So Alex, just kind of to get an overview, what's the state of debt in the U.S. currently?
Yeah, I think it's one which is definitely growing over the last 10, 20 years. High propensity of Americans to be comfortable taking out debt, be that a credit card, a student loan, an auto loan, and there's certainly good and bad types of debt. I think where we start to see problems is people going delinquent on the debt, and about 1 in 3 Americans currently with debt are behind on it, are delinquent, which is a mounting issue.
Is that student debt alone, or is that encompassing all types, including credit card, mortgages?
Encompassing all types. In terms of student loan debt, the default rate is actually a good deal lower on the federal portfolio, looking at 10 to 15% default rate. But it's the credit cards which tend to be a big issue. You know, people look at them less so as a tool to buy things and more so as a way to live beyond their means, and that's where the problems start to arise. Total amount of consumer debt has risen to $4 trillion. Student loan debt actually makes up about a third of that, so $1.5 trillion in student loans outstanding. That's a number that's grown exponentially since 2005. I think the total outstanding back then was under $400 billion, so we've seen a near quadrupling in student loan debt.
Why has that been?
I think it's primarily the rising cost of tuition. The student loans are unique in that when you're going to take them out, there's no cap, right? So if a school decided they wanted to charge $80,000 next year, presumably all the students who wanted to go there just take the extra, 20, 30K in loans, whatever the tuition hike was. So there's really no incentive on the part of the schools to reduce the tuition given the current format.
And then student debt specifically, it looks like recent college grads owe maybe about $34,000. How does that play with the medical segment? Is it more? Is it less?
Certainly more. To put it simply, average medical student is coming out with about $190K in student loans, and that's a number that's risen kind of in line with the overall outstanding debt in the economy. Medical school tuition costs have significantly risen, and as a result, people who want to go to school have no choice but to take out loans. And I think, that's something that we actually did a survey on at Laurel Road to get a sense of recent graduates' feelings towards their debt. And one of the things that surprised me most was that over half of the respondents said they felt embarrassed about their student loans, after graduation, which I think, is unnecessary. There's no reason to feel embarrassed, given that it's a requisite to get an education these days. Unless you had a pile of money and could pay out of pocket, or a parent who wanted to sponsor your education, you have no choice but to take on these loans. So I think no need to feel any type of embarrassment, given the situation.
Medical school is probably a little bit of a better investment than credit card debt.
For sure. I think credit cards are about as bad a debt as you could have, given the rates and the fact that they're so dangerous, right? You can keep charging and charging, and the payment, you don't have to make any type of regular payment. It's a minimum, maybe $25 or $50 payment. But medical school is an investment. I would look at that kind of through the same lens as investing in real estate, right? You have high hopes that this money you pay to get the education is going to pay off, exponentially in the future.
So for me, to be honest, I looked at it as an investment. I worked prior to going to medical school, so I had a little bit of money saved up to pay for the first part of it. But obviously, it's very expensive. I went to one of the most expensive medical schools in the country, and definitely have a lot of debt. So I was able to refinance actually, and it made me feel a little bit better about the investment I was making. But yeah, it's definitely a scary thought, and it's not a small number, which obviously adds to the anxiety. But as working professionals, we should be able to pay that off over the time frame that most of these loans are over. And then specifically for Laurel Road, are the rates any different when you refinance as a medical professional versus, say, just undergrad debt versus maybe an MBA or a JD, what have you?
They could be. There's a number of factors that we look at in underwriting and pricing the loans. Degree and career is certainly one of them, as is credit profile and total monthly debt expenditures, total monthly income as well. Those are the main things we're looking at.
And if you want an attractive rate, what are the best things you can do to position yourself before you apply for your refinancing?
Yeah, I think probably the one most within your control, other than asking to get paid more money by your employer, is your credit score. That's something, at least I've found, people are maybe unfamiliar with how it's calculated and what exactly goes into it.
So how is it calculated and what goes into it?
Biggest factor is making on-time payments. That seems to be a very easy thing one would know, but you'd be surprised how many people find it perfectly acceptable to miss a month or two of paying their credit card. I think the one which people are most unfamiliar with, which actually does play a fairly significant part in your credit score, is credit utilization level. So the credit bureaus, they don't want to see you utilizing more than 30% of your revolving credit limit. So if you had a $10,000 limit on your card, they don't want to see you spending more than $3,000 a month on that card, even if you pay it off every month. So if you did find yourself paying more than or using more than 30% of your revolving credit limit each month, you would want to call the credit card company, ask for an extension on your line of credit, and that'll reduce your credit utilization level.
Right.
That's one, I think, a pretty significant opportunity to increase your credit score through really doing nothing other than calling the credit card company.
Right. And then a lot of people also worry about applying for new credit cards. Does that hurt your score, or will it help overall since your total credit line will increase with whatever you're approved for?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's some nuance to it. As you said, taking out another card increases your overall revolving credit limit, which should help. Another factor, though, in your credit score is how seasoned are your accounts, how old are they? So if you have a lot of new accounts, that won't reflect particularly well on the credit score. What I've recommended in the past for people to take a look at is if you have a card, say, that you took out in high school or college and it has no annual fee, even if the benefits of the card really aren't that attractive later in life, just keep it open because you'll be able to, or that card will stand as a long-standing credit account that you've had open, and that'll help improve the score.
So it sounds like the 5 components we've kind of gone over for the FICO score: the payment history, the amount owed, the length of credit history, new credit, and the types of credit used. So then how do I protect my credit score? Once I get it to the level I want it to be at, how do I avoid identity theft, and what kind of precautions do you recommend one takes?
I think being vigilant in checking your credit score at least once annually. There are a number of services which can provide you an automated update at much greater frequency than that, but continuing to monitor it is the biggest thing. I mean, identity theft can go unnoticed for months if you're not on top of your credit score and continually checking it.
So should you be checking it every month, every 6 months, every year?
I think every month is probably excessive, though So there are actually some credit cards available, which will send you like a health of credit check every month along with your statement. And that could be a nice feature for people who do want to stay particularly vigilant. I think, a typical good rule of thumb is a few times a year, a handful of times a year. There are services that provide you a free credit report at least once a year. So that, I would say, is the minimum, once a year.
Yeah, so I was actually lucky enough to be born into a household that kind of taught me a lot about finance and economics. And I was an economics major in college. So I got my first credit card my freshman year. I go to Northwestern, and there's always a Citibank rep that kind of walks around. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll apply. It's a no-fee credit card. So I've had it now for, 15 years. And yeah, it doesn't have a lot of benefits, but I keep it solely for the reason that it's old and I've utilized it previously. I use credit cards a lot, right? Because I think my generation prefers to pay literally for anything with credit card instead of cash. A lot of my peers don't even carry cash with them. So our utilization rates are probably higher than that of later or older generations. In terms of how I personally think about it, I essentially think about it as an interest-free loan for 30, 45 days, depending on whenever I charge from. Of course, you can't buy things that you can't afford, and you got to pay off your bill in full every single month. And if you aren't doing that, that's the first thing I would think about doing, since interest rates range from about 11 to 20%, which is obviously a lot higher than any student loan or car loan or even mortgage you're going to be looking at. So that's how I personally think about it. There's a lot of benefits: airline points, hotel points, and what have you. So it's always exciting to open a new card and get those fringe benefits.
For sure. I think you summarized it really well, and you're using it much to your benefit. And I think people shouldn't be afraid of doing that. That's one sentiment I've picked up in the past, is people just have this perception that all credit cards are bad, and you shouldn't put things on a credit card. You should just pay for them in cash or on a debit card. That's not true by any means. If you're using a credit card responsibly and not living beyond your means with it, it's much to your benefit from a credit profile standpoint, in that it's another line of debt that you have open, improving your credit history. And also, you mentioned the points. I mean, I personally have a number of credit cards which I use sort of strategically based on what that purchase is, whether it's travel, dining, groceries. You can get 2, 3, 5 points in some instances for each dollar spent, which is the equivalent of 2% off, 3% off, 5% off every purchase you're making. So it can be used to your benefit so long as it's done strategically.
Alex, we've talked about the FICO score. What exactly is a good score? I know the range is wide, and what would you recommend?
It is a wide range, from 300 to 850, though. Anecdotally, I have seen no credit scores in the 300s and very few in the 800s as well. The scores, by and large, are pretty concentrated in, call it the 6 to 750 range. In terms of refinancing with Laurel Road, our credit score minimum is 660. That's similar to what it would take to qualify for a mortgage. Mortgage requirements on a conventional mortgage might be a bit lower than that. But by and large, you want to have a credit score of at least 650.
Does it matter if your score is higher? Will you get a lower interest rate? Or if it's lower, will you get a higher interest rate?
Both. So the higher your credit score is, the more favorable pricing and terms you'll receive on loan offers, not just student loans, but mortgages, auto loans, credit cards. The higher your score, the more favorable terms you're going to qualify for. And conversely, the lower your score, the less options you'll have at your disposal. I mean, on the credit card side, if your credit was really suffering and subprime, you would have a hard time qualifying for some of those premier type of cards with nice point incentives that we talked about. You're more likely in a starter credit building type of card.
So if my score was struggling and it was 500, I should reduce the amount of debt I owe,
Yep.
get current on missed payments, and then pay off debts that have gone into collection. And I guess I can always increase my credit limit by applying for more cards. But that's something to be exceptionally careful with, especially if you're struggling with repayment.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a spiral. and your scores obviously won't improve if you're utilizing that new limit.
Correct. I know that it's a tough situation if you've had some struggles with your credit, but there are certainly steps which you just outline that can be taken to increase a credit score. And I think holistically, credit scores tend to increase organically as you progress through your career. Those coming right out of school, you probably don't have many lines of debt. You certainly probably don't have much of a mix of debt. And those are things that tend to just naturally happen as you progress through your life. You graduate, you have your student loans, maybe you have a credit card. You shortly thereafter maybe take an auto loan. You purchase a home. You perhaps take a personal loan to make a major purchase. All things that are, so long as they're done within your means, are good financial decisions and will ultimately help your credit score increase as you go on throughout your life.
That was Dr. Chirag Shah and Alex Macielak providing an overview of U.S. student debt and discussing how to improve your credit score. Be sure to tune in for other episodes in this 4-part series about student loans, student debt, and refinancing. For more information on how to manage student loans, visit www.ama-assn.org/refinance loans. You can also subscribe to Making the Rounds and other great AMA podcasts on iTunes and Google Play, or visit ama-assn.org/podcasts. Thanks for listening.